The weary traveler draws close to the end of the path.
We have never had it so good.
All of this just works.
We are selling tea to China.
You did not have to redeem this, ma'am!
Out with them, forget about them.
Your broadcast is very biased. You've written a lot of ridiculous articles, so I would encourage you to be more journalistic and have more integrity.
Socialism is when the government does stuff.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. Now, a lot of stuff has happened. I have named this one Picking Sides and Youth Crime Follow-Up. Youth Crime Follow-Up might have to go by the wayside. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on the border of India and Pakistan coming up. But before that, just, minutes ago, there was a new pope elected. So we'll do a bit of that first, then we'll have a bit of fun, then we'll get into the serious geopolitics. Ludwig, how are you doing?
Hello, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. So yeah, I just read there's been elected a new pope. I try to figure out what do you say to a Catholic after the pope has been elected. Is there some specific greeting they have or something?
All I know about this is that I have. So my parents' neighbors are Italian, and they told me that there's a saying in Italy. I don't know what the exact words they told me, but I can't remember. But it basically means that you say you have to have one round pope and then one straight pope, because if you look at the history, they're usually one fat, one slim, and it turns out that they've now elected two slim popes in a row, which means that doomsday is probably upon us.
We're finished now. Damn it! It's well, I mean, it was so Francis was thin. And then Leo, who's the new guy, is thin.
Yeah.
Was Francis that thin? I don't know. Do we have some kind of image comparison here? Because I read about this as well.
I can bring this up. So let's see. Pope Francis. I mean, I suspect he probably wasn't that thin at the end. Most people tend to become a bit rotund at their...
saggy at the end there.
But I would say at least when he started in office, it was quite thin. Let's see here. I just have a general... Yeah, maybe they've upheld it. He was more rotund than I can remember.
Yeah, that's the image of Francis that I remember. So thin pope doesn't immediately strike my mind.
No. But now there's a thin pope, it seems.
Pope Sempic. And
we have Robert Francis. Is an American pope, and I can read from the profile before the conclave. Despite the Vatican's long-standing opposition to the idea of a pope from the US because of the country's superpower status and secular global influence, the moderate Chicago-born Prevost is still one to watch. Created a cardinal by Francis in 2023, the former leader of the Augustinian order was also appointed by the late pope to the powerful dicastery for bishops, which oversees the selection of new bishops from around the world. Those senior roles, combined with the fact that he has a significant missionary experience in Peru, having served as bishop of the northern city of Chiclayo, may go some way to redeeming him in the eyes of those who would not usually countenance the idea of an American pope. So, a liberal, modern American pope is what we got.
The trad cats, they keep getting cock-blocked by the papacy over and over again, I suppose. I mean, I'm not Catholic myself, so I don't want to weigh in too much on this. There's been some interesting stuff that have been going on. like Donald Trump posted a picture of himself, like AI generated, where he is the Pope. Which got me sort of thinking a little bit about this. And things happen so quickly now in the news cycle.
And then he posted one where it was like a Sith Lord or something. Or was he supposed to be a Jedi, but his lightsaber was red? Like someone messed up.
Yeah, well, it's just the Indian guy who's operating the White House account on Twitter. Apparently doesn't really get Star Wars continuity, or maybe they just like the trolling of it. And I was like thinking, okay, what's the significance of this day? It's like it's just May the 4th because that sounds like May the Force.
Yeah,
and that's something Americans
entirely dreamed up by Disney, right? To sell more Star Wars stuff.
This is it has to be like the dumbest made up holiday I've heard of. I'm aware that something like this has existed. It's just so incredibly silly. I thought it had some more significance other than it just sounded like a Star Wars catchphrase or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever. We just have to accept the word as is. But yeah, so Donald Trump was going full anti-Pope, and I was trying to just kind of gauge exactly how kind of the trad cats would feel about it, and sort of how they would respond, because it's not that you can't like you post dumb AI images, but there is a kind of history and mythology of the idea of the anti-Pope, which is something that I'm not picking up because I'm Catholic. It's just influence, like osmosis from heavy metal and fantasy, which I think is about as far as most people go when it comes to Catholic orthodoxy, right?
Sure.
But, yeah. The idea of like the anti-Pope is really sort of the Pope usurper, somebody who takes the mantle of the Pope without having the correct, having gone through the correct channels, or having been ordained as the current new Pope.
I mean, I'm gonna source Cunley Drogba on Twitter because he usually has a lot of interesting takes on stuff like this.
It's such a funny channel, a funny account. I don't even understand who he is or where he comes from. I assume he is British, but
sometimes he seems to post from like some random African country, so I'm not quite sure. He's straddling the line very carefully, and he's doing very well at that. His posts are honestly a lot of the times on another level, right?
Sometimes politics, sometimes art. Always funny.
Exactly.
Always on the pulse.
Yep.
Yeah, please follow. If you're not following this guy, then you should.
Yeah. Election of new liberal American Pope Leo the 14th is counterintuitively a conservative choice for the Vatican because it ensures the continuation of the church tradition of theological disputes between secular and religious power. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I think this is something that you're trying to touch on with the anti-Pope.
Yeah, no, I guess the anti-Pope, I assume it's sort of derived from the Antichrist, but it's sort of supposed to be these characters who are trying to usurp the Pope's power. Whether it's other people. I
understand that it's from Antichrist, but I always understood it to be more of like a I guess a historical description and political term, right?
Yeah, it is that too, but it's really about just people who are trying to usurp the kind of supreme religious ordination by saying that I have the authority. Essentially, I'm like Jesus's vessel on the earth without having been ordained or something like this. Which is why I thought the Trump thing was interesting, because it has like a certain there's something more to this AI shit posting than just AI shit posting. It has like this always. I don't know why, if it's the AI itself that's picking up on this. We talked about this with the Trump Gaza, the sort of Trump Gaza slop that he created. It's like, okay, if it was just slop, but it keeps putting in this sort of biblical imagery all the time with like the Trump golden statue and like the Baphomet casinos and like all of this. Like the women with the beards, and there's a lot of this sort of revelation, sinister stuff that just keeps coming into these AI generated images. And I thought the same like with the Trumpian kind of anti-Pope thing, that it's okay on its face, it's just like some guy who says I'd like to be Pope, but when you're at least on paper the leader of the most powerful country in the world, it is the kind of a hint at usurpation. Is he serious? Is he not? I mean, it's kind of like everything else with Trump, like with the Greenland and the Canada and the will he, won't he stuff. So I guess that's kind of, to me, when I look at it, that's where the offensive edge comes in, because he's always kind of on the fence if he's going to do something or not, or if he's serious or not. And when you're like a world leader and you're sort of flirting with the idea, like I want to be the Pope, and here's a picture of me as the Pope or something like that, I assumed there would have been a sort of stronger backlash in there, but it seems like the American Catholics are pretty much as divided along party lines as Americans are on anything. It's really more like the red-blue team stuff. That's in their kind of guiding morality rather than some sort of absolute religious adherence. And but I think you're going to see that with the new Pope as well. The response, the commentary that I'm seeing is that people think this is just going to be Francis 2.0. And maybe Kerpa, what was his name again? The Twitter user. It's a hard name to remember, that he has like the correct take on this. I'm just getting the impression that they picked another Pope that like nobody is going to be happy with. I guess when Francis came in, there was a sort of progressive.
I do find it kind of strange, because this is a conclave of, for lack of a better term, hardcore, bishops, right? And sure, they might, have various levels of disagreement, but why would they always end up picking liberal popes, right?
Yeah, and even it's so odd with we don't want to pick an American one because of the America's controversial. Oh, well, yeah, I'm glad it's not controversial anymore. Like,
yeah, we fixed it.
I'm glad that problem's over. So while like the liberal theology stuff is kind of going out of style, it seems like a lot of the energy, we've talked about this before, it seems to be with some of the more kind of resurgence of the more reactionary strands of fundamentalism and mysticism. And you'd think that they would at least try to flirt a little bit or try to surf that wave, but they seem, no, we're just going to continue this this tradition. At the first, I was sort of thinking that they're doing this because, it's like the Vatican's version, like the Vatican is Canada or something. Like they just have to pick a counter pope to Donald Trump or something. But maybe that's just completely off. I honestly should just shut my mouth because I have no clue what's going on, like in the insides of the papacy and this stuff. It's just an interesting thing. So I'll have to leave it to the proper Catholic analysts to do this.
All right. Moving on quickly, we'll take a bit of a detour, and we'll see how long we spend on this, depending on how much we want to spend on India. One of the newspapers in Norway did a highlight on Norway, Illinois, which is the first permanent Norwegian settlement in America and the first sort of official Norwegian detachment ever sent to America. And this year it's 200 years ago since they founded their city. So I'm going to read a bit from this, and we're going to have a look at some of the pictures that the reporter took from Norway, Illinois, and we'll see what we can learn about our brothers in the West. On the farmland country outside Chicago is the first permanent Norwegian settlement in America. Today, there are 25,000 descendants of those who left 200 years ago. He calls himself 3/4 Norwegian and has auditioned for the TV program Everything for Norway, together with his daughter. He's dressed in a Norwegian flag t-shirt, and he spends much of his time taking care of Norwegian American cultural heritage. The burning passion of Dave Johnson, the passionate Dave Johnson is the Mr. Norway in small Norway, Illinois. But the 67-year-old has so far never been to Norway. I've never had the time. I don't even have a passport, he said. In 2025, it is the 200th year anniversary of the start of the organized Norwegian emigration to America. In that story, the village of Norway on the surface prairie outside of Chicago is particularly important. And this is where Norwegian America really started. Norway was the first permanent Norwegian settlement in the United States. Today, it's a place with about 400 inhabitants, and the village is a living museum of Norwegian immigration history and culture in the United States. This is Dave Johnson, Mr. Norway. Here we got
We
him
got a
with
true Norwegian patriot here, all decked out.
I can kind of see his Norwegian heritage, though, so I see it. The cars fly past central Norway along the Kling Pearson Memorial Highway. Dave Johnson hopes to get a sign up telling drivers about just this man, because the immigration leader Pearson from Tysvær in Rogaland is central to the story of this place. He came here as the first Norwegian in 1833, walking. Perhaps a Norwegian had never been so far west in America before. Pearson had learned that an area on the prairie here would soon be put up for sale when he arrived. He stopped on his way in Chicago and found that there was really only a swamp with some camps of indigenous people and a fort. Chicago was not yet a city at the time, says Johnson, who has written a booklet about Norwegian immigration here to LaSalle County, Illinois. Today, this area is located about an hour by car southwest of the city of Chicago. Pearson would have spent about a week on foot. He must have followed the Fox River down here and found the path that indigenous people had walked on for thousands of years, says Dave. And here we have the fast stop. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a fast stop or if this is like a play on words, like with the Norwegian, because this means like a sure stop, I guess. The Kling Pearson Memorial Highway runs through Norway, Illinois. By the time this photo was taken about a year ago, local Trump supporters had already signaled their standpoint to the people passing by. Yeah, someone's put up the, what does it say? Don't blame me, I voted for Trump sign. It's always funny to me how Americans sort of want to put their political like they want to tell their neighbors about their political affiliations. It's kind of strange. I've never understood that.
They love bumper stickers, right? This is a uniquely American thing. I don't know any other country in the world that uses bumper stickers, for example. Like they put all their opinions on their car, and when you drive behind them, you have to know. So, but when was this picture taken? This was like 2022
a year ago.
Or something? I see. Yeah, okay.
2023, probably 24, maybe early 24. This was before the election. The Norwegian emigrants dreamed of rich, vast areas of fertile American soil, and here they would find it. Along the Fox River, there would be many Norwegian farms. Norwegian immigrants were promoted to the Potawatomi tribe's former lands, writes, according to author Sverre Darkhagen in the book The Dream of America. But now the indigenous people were driven away by the march of colonization. History would have it that there was a large oak tree here. Kling Pearson fell asleep under that tree, and while he slept, he dreamed of Moses and all that, according to Johnson. In the dream, Pearson received a message from God to bring his countrymen here to settle. The authorities in the young state of Illinois used the uncultivated prairie to lure European settlers with cheap and attractive soil. The following year, Pearson led a party of Norwegians with loads westward from their temporary home in the state of New York. 6 men with their families, 4 of whom had been on the Restoration ship, which in 1825 sailed from Stavanger to New York City with the first group of Norwegian immigrants. The new settlement they established in 1835 became Norway, Illinois. Soon, Norwegians were accumulating in the area. It's always strange to me, like, what are we going to call this place? Norway. It's like, okay. Well, that's where the Norwegians live, right? Soon other Norwegians were accumulating in the area. The colony here became the launching point for the entire extensive Norwegian immigration in America further in the 1800s and 1900s. And this is where you find Norway and Illinois on the map. You can see it's a little bit outside of Chicago. And they must have gone from New York then all the way to Chicago and then a little bit further to find Norway. The oldest Norwegian Lutheran church in America is located in this town. Preacher Elling Ailsen from Vossestrand was a Haugian. He emigrated to America and came to Fox River like many others. And there he went from house to house before buying a property and had a combined private house and assembly hall erected in 1840. The author writes that the house became the first meeting room in the Norwegian American communities at all. Or at large. Here, worship and Haugian meetings were held, and Eilson was ordinary to the first Norwegian Lutheran priest in the United States. Ordained, I suppose, to be the first priest. After a few years, the log cabin burned down, and the Lutheran church was built in 1852. It is the church that today stands and is listed in the National Register of Historical Sites. So there you have the original Lutheran Norwegian church, or I guess the replacement, that still stands today. According to Johnson, the road outside the church runs the same steps that Clem Pearson came walking along almost 200 years ago, apparently. The local museum is a collection of just about everything possible that has an association with the Norwegian settlers, or Norway in general. A lot of this is donated, and they even sell Sweden stickers. Johnson shows off a coffin that was featured on the restoration in the 1825. And over here we have King Olaf's coffee cup, he pointed out. And here it says, this cup was the cup that King Olaf of Norway drank out of when he was here in October 1975. That's it. They've taken his coffee cup. 50 years ago, King Olav V came to Norway, and he was on a long tour of the United States in connection with the last major emigration anniversary. And he visited Norway on 17th of October 1975. This is still remembered as a major event. Let's see here, 40 to 50 volunteers are now working to take care of the Norwegian American history in Norway, meaning Norway, Illinois. And I am one of the youngest, says Dave Johnson. Yeah, I can't imagine this is a young man's game, unfortunately.
Well, I actually looked up the town, Norway, Illinois, and they seem to have a median age of 38, which is about
not too bad.
10 years younger than I had expected.
Yeah,
at least
10. I would assume.
So, it's actually not too bad. They seem to be located in like a general, slightly more rural county, but it's mostly sort of service-based, white-collar economy.
Mm.
And they're not doing too bad for themselves.
I mean, there's 400 people. What are the demographics? I assume a lot of Norwegian Americans.
I think this one is pretty white because it's only 5,000-ish people.
Yeah.
And just as another fun fact, they're not the only kind of town like this in the United States. You see, some other states that have their own Norway. Maine has one with around the same population, 5,000. Michigan has a Norway with about half of that, say about 2,000 people. Iowa has a small city with 500 people. That's like nothing. And then South Carolina, 300 people. And so they're getting ranking them downwards. 300 people in the city.
I like this sign here: parking for Norwegians only. You can buy that.
I mean, it's cool that they're keeping this stuff alive, but this is a really niche, right? There's like a really small group of people. But there's so much of that in the United States, though. I mean, you don't think about it. You think about like these larger groups, like the WASPs and the Hispanics and all these things. But you have like this little mishmash that exists on the outskirts of larger towns of these various settler groups that hold on to their heritage. I think it's cool. It's a nice little exercise in diplomacy for us.
Yeah. So this store is run by some guy named Chuck Brokensius, and he says, I'm the 5th generation in my family who runs the store. 5th generation? That means it goes back quite a long time. My ancestors started up the store in 1848, he says, and his father was 102 years old. Now Chuck is the senior who steps in when needed, while his son Gabriel manages the business on a daily basis. The store has many Scandinavian goods, such as fish balls. That's a translation error. What would you call this in English? It's
I think it is fish balls. I've heard that term used previously.
Sure.
So fish balls, brown cheese,
and brown cheese. But Chuck's they have trouble getting hold of the goods they want. My daughter makes pastry, he says. She probably makes 22 dozen every day. Is that real? 22 dozen. We sell a lot of it. He says, how many people are passing by Norway, Illinois?
What kind of pastries are they making, I wonder?
I don't know.
Is she selling these kind of like egg and shrimp cakes or something? If you seen this kind of like Scandinavian nightmare cooking?
Yeah.
I don't mean to take the piss too much, but there's been dedicated threads on Twitter just to like the horridness of Scandinavian cooking. They use pretty bad examples. Let's see. I'll see if I can find something. You can just keep reading.
Yeah. Nordanon asked if the demographics have been like replaced by Germans or something. I'm not sure if you have the data on that.
That's really hard to say.
Yeah. We specialize in seafood. Do you know about lutefisk? I didn't like it before, but I can eat it now. We have cod, lobster, shrimp, herring. People come from a large area in the district to shop at the Norway store. But what about the future of this village? How does this, like, that's, I mean, I'm glad it's doing good or doing well. I just didn't know there was a market for this, right? I think it's going to be good. We have more. That is
my question as well. Like, there's a market for like lutefisk and this kind. It is like this parallel reality stuff where, like, maybe some brown country reaches first world status before Scandinavia, and Scandinavians are leaving to that country to sell lutefisk at stands or something, like lutefisk kebab.
I don't think we did a lot of that. I don't think we did a lot of that. I
sent you a photo in the private chat there. Maybe you could show the audience.
Oh yeah, we're gonna
the kind of like pastries that are being sold.
Yeah, we're gonna have our own sort of like Indian street food version of this. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. This is Scandinavian shrimp cake with caviar in the middle, and we have
is that caviar or eggs?
Yeah.
Maybe it's both.
I mean, caviar is eggs usually. I mean, if you get the high-end caviar.
Well, I meant like chicken eggs, right?
Oh yeah, it is eggs too. There's eggs on it. I'm just talking about in the center there.
Sorry. I meant like the center of the actual cake. Like, is that a layer?
Yeah, I think that's eggs, or just a type of soft bread.
Yeah, give me a would or wouldn't, I guess. I think this is Swedish though.
I mean, close enough. I've never been too big on a lot of this seafood stuff in general, but maybe in another universe I can appreciate that a little more.
So we have more business here. We have someone who does welding. We got a car repair shop here that's up and running again. We have a barber and a couple of beauty salons. We have a go-kart track. There's a resort nearby. Says Norway veteran Chuck Borchenius optimistically. So apparently Norway, Illinois is, 100 years from now, it's like the new Disneyland or something. The Norwegian Museum across the street has its own storehouse, and in a garage is a boat reminiscent of a small Viking ship that sailed on Lake Michigan. This isn't the one that, no. This was built in 2004. Okay. So this is probably, I mean, do you think that it's hard to know if this is like a replica or if this was built in Norway and then donated? But it looks to be using like the proper wood and techniques, at least for the base of it. Like the drake on the end here is a bit silly, but otherwise it looks quite legit. I mean, you probably live, without spoiling too much, Ludwig Path, but I'm pretty sure you live in like
not qualified to comment on the craftsmanship.
No, you probably live where there's most sort of like interest in replicating Viking ships in Norway. They apparently have a new storehouse that's built like an old, what do you call this? I forget. But this is also like a traditional way of building the logs, etc. Let's see here. They're refurbishing the old holding room, the Temperance Hall. Okay. So let me check here if there's anything more. No, they're just talking more about the history And in October, there will be a 3-day celebration of the emigration anniversary in Norway. Dave Johnson dreams of getting a royal visit again, perhaps by our Crown Prince Haakon. If so, there will possibly be a new coffee cupping exhibit in the museum in the old church. Dave Johnson has now officially obtained a passport. We did it, guys. We're back. All right. It was over, but we're back. And he and his wife are on their very first trip to Norway this spring. On May 17th, they will celebrate in Oslo. So if any of you are in Oslo and you see Dave Johnson and his wife, we'll scroll up and find.
Press F to pay respects, at least. Just drop by.
You have to pay respects. He's traveled a long way. May 17th is our constitutional celebration day, which we take very seriously, at least compared to a lot of other European countries. So, if you see this guy in Oslo, give him a handshake or something. He's an American. He's going to love it, right?
Peak Norway. Right. Just tell him we sent you. And you get a promo code. For his shop.
You get a promo
you can go buy
code.
Lutefisk from him.
Okay, so let's move on to some geopolitics, shall we? Let's see here. So we're going to talk a little bit about India and Pakistan. We'll go through sort of what's happening, why it's happening, and just sort of hit a bit on the fact that this is like an old school border dispute with no like good or bad guys. So it's leading to a lot of weird sort of splits in who's supporting who, right? Pakistan has vowed to respond after India's missile strikes. Here's what we know. New Delhi and Islamabad ramped up hostile rhetoric for a second day after India's assault on parts of Punjab and Pakistan-administered Kashmir, igniting fears as both nations stand on the brink of a wider conflict. The spiking cross-border fire puts India and Pakistan in dangerous territory, with Islamabad vowing to retaliate against New Delhi's assault early Wednesday, as the international community calls for restraint. India's strikes have killed at least 31 people across Punjab and Pakistan-administered Kashmir, including a 3-year-old girl, and wounded 46 others, according to a military spokesperson. A senior Indian defense source says at least 16 civilians were killed by Pakistani shelling on the Indian side of the line of control in Kashmir. New Delhi said the strikes are in response to the massacre of 26 people, mostly Indian tourists, who were killed in April when gunmen stormed a scenic mountain spot in the India-administered part of Kashmir, a long-disputed border region. India blamed Pakistan for the shootings, which Islamabad has denied.
This happened when J.D. Vance visited, by the way.
Exactly, yeah.
So, just mentioning.
India launched Operation Sindoor in the early hours of Wednesday morning local time, Tuesday night, in both Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Indian officials claimed no Pakistani civilian, economic, or military sites were struck in the 25-minute operation, which targeted a terrorist infrastructure of 2 militant groups, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. But Pakistan is painting a different picture of the strike, saying that civilians were killed and mosques were hit across 6 locations. CNN has yet to verify these claims. Some of those strikes hit the densely populated province of Punjab, Pakistan's military said, and were the deepest India has struck inside Pakistan since one of their wars in 1971. New Delhi also confirmed it targeted air defense systems in several locations in Pakistan on Thursday morning. The government announcement marked the first time India confirmed its attacks on Pakistani military installations. India warned its latest response came after Pakistan tried to attack military targets in northern and western India overnight. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for, quote, continued alertness and clear communication, side note, probably over Telegram, in his first comments since the recent escalation in hostilities started. Speaking, that's one of the funnier, Drukpa Khanli posts recently, is that India has one massive Telegram channel where the Prime Minister can just wish everyone good morning. Let me see if I can find it. I might not be able to dig it up, but if some of you in the chat have it, that would be incredibly funny. No, it's too late. It's probably like a week ago or something. Let's see here. Okay, we were speaking as he chaired a high-level meeting on Thursday. Modi stressed the need for strong internal coordination and resilience. Earlier, Indian Defense Minister Ranjit Singh told a meeting with political leaders that his country's military operation against targets in Pakistan, quote, remains ongoing. Burkhal, a member of 23 Months, thank you so much, says, big news, I plant potato today. Good, Finn. Biggest news of today, potato. And here we can see where India has launched attacks into Pakistan. So here we have the border of India. Here we have New Delhi. And we have the border region here. So this up here in the north, next to, I guess, basically next to Afghanistan, if you want to, that's the small peninsula here. Land peninsula would be Pakistan administered Kashmir. How did Pakistan respond to this? Pakistani security sources claimed that they had shot down 5 Indian Air Force jets and 1 drone early Wednesday, including 3 Rafales, sophisticated French-made jets that New Delhi only acquired a few years ago. And for those of you on Twitter, the Sam Hyde memes, of both the pilots and the people who shot them down have been pretty great. People editing Indian and Pakistani versions of Sam Hyde.
The ghost of Kashmir.
The ghost of Kashmir, right. A high-ranking French intelligence official later told CNN that Pakistan had downed 1 Rafale and that French authorities were looking into whether any more were brought down. Why does French authorities know whether or not their, former... Like, is there some part of the contract that says that France keeps, like, the monitoring systems of their planes, so they know how many has gone down, even though India owns them?
I would assume that. I'm no tech insider on that stuff, but it's a good question.
One senior Pakistani security source says 125 jets fought for over an hour, staying in their own airspaces and firing missiles from afar, while Pakistani's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said they had blown the 5 Indian jets to smithereens. So we're having a bit of like the, what's become quite common now, the post-truth, Uno reverse card shit flinging. So it's kind of hard to know what's actually been going on. You did not have to redeem, all that stuff.
Fuck you, bloody, no, you saw.
Fuck you, bloody, right, yeah. On Thursday, Pakistan said it downed another 25 loitering munition Harop drones across the country, which, that might actually be true, which are Israeli-made flying bombs guided by an operator. That would be very expensive, though, I think. Because those like special made Israeli drones are generally very expensive compared to like you've seen that a lot in Ukraine. Like the Ukrainians will basically like build their own drones out of a shed with like the explicit purpose of just like taking out like a Russian drone that is worth like 10 times theirs to try to tip the scales. So if that's true, that's in terms of like money a pretty big loss. One of these drones was able to, quote, partially engage its target near Lahore, a city of around 13 million people near the border with India, wounding 4 army personnel, according to Pakistan Army spokesman Lieutenant General Ahmed Sharif Chaudhry. Sorry. The military official described India's latest drone strike as, quote, a serious provocation. Quote, the security of the region and beyond is at risk, according to Chaudhry. This is members of the media filmed the inside of a building after it was hit by an Indian strike in Bahawalpur in Pakistan. India's government stayed silent after Pakistan's claims of shooting down Indian planes first surfaced on Wednesday. The Indian embassy in China pushed back against what it called disinformation after Chinese state media reported its planes had been downed. CNN has been unable to verify Pakistan's claims and has reached out to the Indian Air Force and Ministry of Defense for comment. But multiple reports of plane crashes in Indian territory have emerged since. In India's Punjab province, eyewitnesses and local government officials said a plane crashed out of the night sky in the early hours of Wednesday, around the same time Pakistan claims it shot down the jets. The official told CNN the aircraft was unidentified, but, quote, seems to be ours. Hey, it looks like one of ours. In India and in an Indian-administered Kashmir, eyewitnesses and a local official in the village of Wuyan said an unidentified aircraft crashed on Wednesday. Photos by AFP news agencies showed plane wreckage, though it is unclear who the aircraft belongs to or what brought it down. What else? Sorry about that. Is happening on the ground. The two sides have exchanged shelling and gunfire across the LOC, the de facto border that divides Kashmir, nearly every day since the April 22 massacre that triggered the latest escalation. Authorities in Indian-administered Kashmir ordered citizens to evacuate from areas deemed dangerous on Wednesday, with some residents telling CNN they were staying in underground bunkers. The strikes have disrupted flights and sowed confusion, with Pakistan opening and closing parts of its airspace. Multiple major international airlines are avoiding flying over Pakistan. What prompted all of this? What is Kashmir? Muslim-majority Kashmir has been a flashpoint in India-Pakistan relations since both countries gained their independence from Britain in 1947. The two nations emerged from the bloody partition of British India, Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan. Both claim Kashmir in full and, months after becoming independent, fought their first of 3 wars over this territory. The divided region is now one of the most militarized places in the world. So here we can see the contested region in a bit of a, more close-up. India has long accused Pakistan of harboring militant groups there that conduct attacks across the border, something that Islamabad has long denied. The massacre in the tourist hotspot of Pahalgam in April sparked widespread anger in India, putting heavy pressure on the Hindu nationalist government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I'm just going to check the chat if anyone is saying... No, they're talking about potatoes. India immediately blamed Islamabad, sparking a tit-for-tat retaliatory measures in which both countries downgraded ties, cancelled visas for each other's citizens, and saw India pull out of a key water-sharing treaty. The last India-Pakistan war over Kashmir in 1999 killed more than 1,000 Pakistani troops by the most conservative estimates. How many did, none of the Indians die? In the decades since, the two countries have... I guess... In the decades since, the two countries have clashed multiple times, most recently in 2019 when India conducted airstrikes in Pakistan after it blamed Islamabad for a suicide car bomb attack in the region. But those recent clashes did not explode into all-out war. Both sides are aware of the risks. Since 1999, the two countries have worked to strengthen their militaries, including arming themselves with nuclear weapons. And that's, a lot of people on Twitter have been memeing about, if they nuke each other, the world wins. Here you have Indian soldiers standing guard at Pampore, an Indian-administered Kashmir, this Wednesday. The strikes have raised global alarm and pleas for the two nations to prevent further confrontation. The United Arab Emirates, China, Russia, Turkey and Japan are among the countries urging both sides to de-escalate. United Nations leaders have similarly voiced concern, while well-known activists, including Pakistani Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai, have called for peace. U.S. President Donald Trump, meanwhile, said he was willing to assist in easing the violence, saying on Wednesday, "I get along with both. I know both very well, and I want to see them work it out." And that's it. Do you want to bring up? You sent me an article. Do you want to have that up on the screen?
There's various infographics that you could look at here, because just a couple of days ago, I didn't know much about this conflict at all. I know what India is. I know what Pakistan is. That this sort of Pakistan is like a break-off nation of India, of Muslims. So it's kind of a Muslim-Hindu thing, mostly. And apparently the conflicts there have been quite consistent and continuous since the kind of break-off or the inception of both nations, as you can see on this infographic. The first thing that I thought about is you get these type of takes on Twitter, like the one you mentioned, where it's yeah, I hope both nations could just glass each other and that would be great. Because because of the people who live there, right? That's kind of what's the reference point you actually have for India and Pakistan. It's well, depending on which Western country you live in, you have immigration from one of these, or you have from both. If you live in Scandinavia, you likely have more immigration from Pakistan. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I know that's at least the case in Norway. I mean, you have Indians, but it's not the same as, say...
They're usually from Sri Lanka, in my experience. Yeah. And they tend to hate the mainland Indians with a passion.
Exactly. And of course, it's really weird because to us, they're just like dirty brown foreigners, but they have sort of a long history of kind of mutual...
it's literally that meme of like two Indian guys saying like, you're a subhuman, right? To each other.
We don't want your kind here. So I assume everybody has seen it. So you just have that take because like, who do you dislike the most? And that's just a function, I think, of exposure. Like if you live someplace where there's just a lot of Indians, then you don't like them. If there's a lot of Pakistanis, then you don't like them. But there's, of course, that's just like the standard kind of what you'd consider a gut reaction layer. The next reaction layer for a Westerner is the it's more of the symbolism, like of the alliances of what you imagine inside of your like Marvel Cinematic Universe version of geopolitics. How this is supposed to hang together, and just like with the recent conflicts in Syria, actually looking at the alliances and the facts on the ground, it's a good sort of cold bucket of water on your head if you're too far up into this kind of Dugan Cinematic Universe nonsense that I think a lot of people are. But regardless of that, like my surface take on it is that this conflict will just be a proxy of Israel-Palestine for a lot of Westerners, simply because India and Israel have close cooperation. I mean, the memes on Twitter, it's not just memes like where they have these two lions that are shaking hands or whatever.
Like AI generated, like
and the Indian flag, and they're the two two bodybuilders, so the Indian one and the Israeli one, but they actually have military cooperation. They sell weapons to each other. They do like training and stuff like this. And Pakistan is then kind of the smaller nation in this. They're part of the Organization of Islamic Countries that I didn't know existed until 5 minutes ago, but the OIC is apparently a thing. It's a sort of like broader alliance of roughly developing countries, I guess, who are backing Pakistan. So that's kind of the layer there. It's like, okay, well, do you support Israel or not? And based on that, that's just a proxy for exactly where you're going to stand on this conflict. I think you're going to be very hard pressed to find a single person who supports Israel and Pakistan, for example, in this conflict. Like, I'd almost offer like a slight money reward if you could find like a sincere person who's like both pro-Israel and.
Well, you sent me a graphic of which countries fall on which side, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at that. It's not exhaustive, but it's just like a kind of rough.
Of how confusing this quickly gets, and we have a really good meme coming up after.
Maybe look at the meme first.
Yeah, we can do the meme first. Yeah, just to bring it back to Drukba Kunli. But before we do that, I want to highlight, there are some India jokes in the chat here regarding this, but I think Douge was doing a lot of good work here without, going straight to the poo jokes, because he had a Pulo 1, which I liked, and Strategic Defense Initiative. Both of these were very good. So let's go back to Mr. Drukba Kunli here. And now I want to say before we get going that this is in classic Drukba fashion. I think this is about like 80% a joke, but I think actually some of these people have come out and like they're real, right? There have been people who have come out in favor of either of these, and he says confused about who to. Sorry,
it is like an artwork, this one, because
he's really good.
It might as well just be this. You could just take some random celebrities and slap them onto here, and it's like it's not even completely it's not completely off either.
No, and I was, very distraught because I really want to support, as I told you, my boys Werner Herzog and Hideo Kojima, but it would mean that I would align with Dasha and Pedro Pascal, which, I would probably do something horrible to myself instead. It's not even about like the countries anymore. It's just about the people for me. Like, who would I like to be on the side with?
If you live in the West, you have to like you just have these kind of proxy issues that you're using to like who do you support and what do you want out of this conflict. But of course, it's important to remember that there's the like.
This is so good.
Course,
I mean,
all of this is made.
You could argue that Kojima is what really, pushes it into joke territory, right? But it's also why it's so good.
I wouldn't be too surprised, actually. Like, I mean, Kojima is, he has a very complicated relationship with politics. If you played any of his video games, and
yeah.
He isn't like some kind of like based Japanese militarist.
No, but
guy.
if you played
like,
his latest one,
yeah.
It's basically like 100 hours boiling into like don't be a dick. Like that's his politics. If you played Death Stranding, right? Like he didn't go very deep, I feel, even though it's it's confusing and convoluted. Like the end message is don't be mean to people, which all right, cool, cool. But yeah, I understand like Metal Gear Solid is a lot more into like, the trying to like deal with, war profiteering and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, the way I've seen some interpretations is that, especially with like the last Metal Gear Solid 5, it's that it's really the message is sort of anti-Japanese militarization, because there's a lot of talk of remilitarizing Japan, and that the like the general sort of essence of that game is kind of protest against that idea. So, but again, if you bring up the other image there, where you could look at some of the countries that are actually supporting India and supporting Pakistan, you can get a little bit, more into kind of the mess of reality.
In another way, this is just as confusing, right?
Exactly. That's kind of the point. So a lot of this, say, okay, what are like the hooks that you can try to hang this conflict on? Like the Israel-Palestine is one hook, right? And then you think about, well, BRICS, for example. And this is a bit, but like you go back to kind of the BRICS New World Order thing, which also breaks down here because between China and Russia as a and has had the relation peace between these two countries. Have been involved. The OIC is here as a sort of... Yeah, I'm not getting any roboting or chopping, so...
No, I think that's between StreamYards and YouTube. Sorry, guys. I don't think there's anything I can do about this.
There's nothing we could do, guys.
Nope.
It's just the way that it is. But... Yeah,
sorry,
I guess
continue.
India has, I guess people have a black and white kind of binary category of developed countries and developing countries. But if you have read like books like Factfulness from Hans Rosling, you realize that there is more of a tier or like a layered system to this as to categories of developing countries, where he puts it into four, tiers. If you remember that book, it's like you have the most highly developed tier where most of the Western countries are, and then you have like people who are approaching that level, and then like the tier 2 and 1, whereas like tier 1 is like basically you walk around barefoot and you eat the maggot out of the tree and walk to the well once a day,
right?
Type country, and tier 2 is when you can start building roads and you have bicycles and you can get like basic manufacturing, or maybe like basic processing, digging coal out of the ground with a shovel kind of economy. And then you have like a level 3 economy, which is like where most Western countries were in the 60s, where it's like, say, somewhere like Egypt or some of these Middle Eastern countries, that's where they are now, where we were at in terms of living standards, maybe in like the 50s and 60s. But yeah, India has most of like the tier 4 countries, like say most of the EU countries, Japan. I mean, of course, there might be some reservations in like some particular instances in Europe, but I think most of them are going to go in for India, unless again they take this kind of Israel-Palestine proxy route, whereas most of the Islamic like sort of tier 2, tier 3 countries are going to be behind Pakistan 100%. There's
right. The other thing I would say is that, and I think ultra radical centrists said it in the chat right now, is that could you just slice this on China essentially? Like, are you placing yourself against or for China? And that's where you are on India versus Pakistan.
That's also another interesting proxy because, I mean, we have the countries here, but I found a sort of list as to where you could look at the sort of state of play, I guess, between the two countries. Like India basically edges. If you look at sort of a concept of total war between these countries, India is going to edge out Pakistan on almost every category. Like in sort of total GDP, India is pushing into like the 4 trillions in dollars value, whereas Pakistan is still in the billion category. Same with like GDP per capita, it's almost double for India. Nuclear stockpiles, I think they're pretty close. That's an interesting part of it, that you have essentially two nuclear powers going at it, and the fantasy is then that like the sort of like standard chud right-wing fantasy that they just nuke each other perfectly and and you just win, but typically it's not going to be this clean. So this is something that has implications for us in terms of like you could, for instance, if let's say bombs and nukes and this like really start flying, you could get new waves of migrants possibly moving up towards Europe as well. So it's not just like a happy clappy situation here. It can have economic consequences in terms of goods being sold, supply lines being broken, possible waves of migrants and fallout with other countries being drawn into it. But yeah, let's just keep going on down the tables here. The army size, the Indian army is about 3 times as big as the Pakistani one. For the population, India is pushing 1.5 billion, whereas India is not even. It's maybe 250 million, and the military budgets also reflect something similar. So India edges them out both in every numerical spreadsheet category, including that they have the backing of countries that have the spreadsheet advantage. But yeah, I guess the advantage Pakistan has is just Muslim willingness to kill, willingness to die, battle hardness. That it is something, right? There is a reason why a lot of these countries are able to resist invasions, and why the Chechen Republic was able to resist Russia for as long as they did, because they are quite tough. I would take like the sort of one Pakistani over one Indian any day. I don't know if you have a different view on that, but
no, I kind of understand what you're saying there.
Just in terms of like bloodlust and willingness to kill yourself for the country, I'd put the Pakistanis over the Indians.
They would be in that sense the organized minority, right?
Yeah, or at least just willing to give more, because that there seems to be in like an inverse relationship. But the better the spreadsheet gets, the less willing the people in those countries are to actually die,
to actually invade.
So there's this weird balancing act there that it's just like rich people give less than poor people sometimes to charities. That I think these poor countries are just really willing to go all in and suffer more hardships. And I saw like Trump made some comments recently as well, like sort of complimenting the Houthis on how much punishment they were willing to take, and just keep going. So they have that just hard fuck edge over India. But yeah, I guess nobody is really, at least on sort of a macroeconomic or geopolitical sense, served with complete escalation of this. It is more of like this kind of chud fantasy that is out in play here. So the question is like, who is going to mediate this? Because China would probably be interested in not seeing nuclear escalation the same way they've been interested in not seeing that in Russia with Russia-Ukraine. I guess the United States as well would have been suspected to be kind of a mediator in this, if you believe the rhetoric. But I think a lot of people see Trump as having underperformed geopolitically.
Yeah.
So I don't think a lot of people are holding their breath for Trump to come in and stop this. I guess sort of like fantasy Trump from 4 months ago would have done that. But if you look at sort of the direction things are going with the Russia-Ukraine thing, and what it looks like to me, just based on what I'm reading, is that they're going back to the Biden status quo, and they're just sort of forgetting
Massive
about it.
victory.
Yeah. They're they're okay. They're just giving up doing the peace negotiations because they can't get Russia to give any concessions. So they're now talking about Russian war crimes, and they're making statements like this, and they're going to keep kind of drip feeding Ukraine, or at least selling them weapons, because that was the point. Even at one point, they were considering stopping sales of weapons to Ukraine. But I guess there'll be sort of a solution where the EU is kind of the wallet that pays for it, and then they're going to take that money from the EU and just buy American weapons to keep fighting. And that's going to be that, because there really seems to have been, at least my impression, the proportion of Trump saniness that is going on seems to have diminished after the Liberation Day stuff. I don't know if you have the same impression, but that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah. And Dewey says the anti-war right suddenly gone quiet, right?
Yeah, but
it's going to be interesting
weird.
to see, and the, as you said, coming off of this handling of Ukraine, which really amounted to nothing, right? There was a lot of blustering, and Putin or Russia won by doing nothing, right? And how's that going to, like, do you want that stuff in this conflict as well, right? Wouldn't you want someone else, like from any of these nations other than America, to mediate?
Yeah, the question is like what exactly America can do here, because
if only Shinzo Abe was still alive, he would have done it.
Yes, the world will never be the same after he passed.
Yeah,
but I mean, who is going to mediate? That's also going to be tricky, because many of these countries might support different sides to this conflict, but they both have an interest in.
Weirdly enough, I think Russia is the one that would be like the most neutral here.
Yeah, you'd think that as well, because they have, like, I mean, that's the problem with I guess what Frodia calls like Narnia Russia, or a lot of this sort of Russian fantasy stuff, because they have their fingers in everything almost.
Yeah.
And they've sort of inherited a good relationship with India from the Soviet era, but at the same time,
then they've also catered
supplying
a relationship with China, right?
Yeah, they have a relationship with China, and they're also supplying arms to Pakistan, and they're supplying arms to a lot of these Islamic nations as well. So you can focus on that. It's like saying that, well, they're clearly supplying arms to them. That means that they're supporting them, but they're also supporting India in the same way, and trading with them. They're sort of going to be reliant on India and China for trade if they're going to be closed out from Europe, and maybe even America now, with the Trump stuff, Trump souring on them. So they have an interest.
It sort of just comes back to the fact that it's difficult to look at this through any sort of like, other lens from current conflicts or from any ideology at all. Like, this is the only way this makes sense is to just look at it as like a straight up border dispute between India and Pakistan, and just do realpolitik from there. Right. Yeah,
because this has been an ongoing thing, and it is a nice reality check again, because people come back to these political lenses that it's very easy to do when, say, like the United States is the global hegemon in the 90s, and every interpretation is like a version of Wag the Dog, with the film with Robert De Niro, where it's like it's created spectacle to distract from sexual escapades in the White House or something. But as American power fades, you're just going to have to get comfortable with the reality that no, actually other countries have disputes and interest, and will go and they will fight over it. And as they get more, they get richer, they'll continue. It'll be worse than it has been. So I don't know if there's any aspect that should have been covered that maybe you think we should discuss that haven't already been.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be one of those things where I'm looking forward, in air quotes, to maybe returning to this in a week when it's been some more developments.
I guess what you should open your eyes to is the cyber warfare, right? Because I think both of these countries are going to have, going to deploy a lot of troll farms to basically run their separate propaganda narratives, do bots. And everything, so you're gonna look for anti-Indian and anti-Pakistani memes on message boards, on Telegram, on 4chan, Twitter, wherever they have access. They're probably going to try to leverage some kind of soft power influence in the West to try to tilt these things in various directions.
TikTok's going to be flooded with pro-Pakistan.
Yeah, I imagine so. They're going to I'm just going back to the using Israel-Palestine as a kind of proxy for it, because that is marketing 101. It's like you get people to support you based on something they already like. They say like the story of Edward Bernays who was using like feminism, for example, to sell cigarettes to women, right? Because the women are interested, they like feminism, but they don't like cigarettes. But if you can sort of attach cigarettes to feminism, then you can sell women cigarettes. And it's kind of the same thing with like Pakistan and India.
Shout out to Eddie Bernays on Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care about Pakistan, but I care about Palestine. And if I can attach Pakistan to Palestine, then I care about Pakistan. And that's kind of how most of it, at least the functional, propaganda, the low-end propaganda that's being run by these various troll farm account works, is that, okay, just take a domestic issue or something people care about in the West and try to attach it to that and then make people care about it, because trying to sell things on their own merits is sort of not, it's not very helpful.
So I guess if suddenly we're supposed to care about India a lot, then you know why. I guess.
Yeah, they're already running that. I think, like they have, India has a trade advantage with the developed countries, and they also have a soft power advantage simply for the amount of Indians that are now in high positions, whether it would be people like Rishi Sunak in the UK or
speaking of nudge unit, says Ludwig is talking shit too much. This is in relation to the lag that was happening. Trump got Elon to throttle the stream, but you have to remember that the CEO of YouTube is, if he's not like directly Indian, he's at least a child of Indian immigrants to.
That's a good point. All of these Indian tech CEOs now that are living in the United States, and some of the politicians that are coming in, and so they are sort of
just
rising.
Listen, JD Vance gonna he's gonna toe the line really well now, because he's gonna be getting it at home, right?
Yeah, because that's interesting. Because as I understand, the United States has actually backed Pakistan previously as a sort of anti-Soviet move, right? Whereas the Soviets back India, and then the US backs Pakistan. But like with the current makeup of the US elite as is, then India is kind of the obvious choice for them. There seems to be no upside for them to be backing Pakistan in this at all.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Let's do one real quick report before we leave. For those of you who have been following the Longhouse for a while, we have been sort of like covering anytime there's something in the news about, youth crime. We have kept that sort of, story alive on our show. And there's a fresh report that say that youth crime is leveling off in Oslo, which means that, as the article says, youth crime remains high, but the growth has stalled, according to a new report. The violence is settling to an unacceptably high level, but it is gratifying that the growth seems to have stopped, is what City Council leader Erik Solberg says.
So managing this stuff has become like the central bank managing inflation. It's going to keep going up, but we've slowed down the rate of youth crime. It's the best we can do.
How do we reach the kids? Yeah. The growth in juvenile delinquency in Oslo seems to be leveling off. According to a new report from Oslo Municipality, the number of reviews among children and young people in 2024 was approximately the same as in 2023. At the same time, the amount of crime is at a higher level than before the pandemic. As of 2015, there has been an increase in juvenile delinquency. Compared to the early 2000s, there's still less crime now than before. Which is interesting because, I think the type of crime and the criminals have changed a lot, but the amount of crime is less. Especially if population growth is included in the calculation. Quote, if you see the developments in a longer time perspective and you control for population growth, the registered crime has decreased since the early 2000s. Less profit, more violence. The report shows that there's less crime among those under the age of 18, but there's a slight increase in violence. In 2024, 841 reports of physical violence were registered with one or more perpetrators aged 10 to 22 years. That's 11 more than 2023. So, we're not talking about huge numbers, but remember, what I always say here is that critical mass is the thing we have to look out for. There have also been fewer robberies, but the number of threats has increased by 16%. In 2024, a total of about 7.87 thousand reviews were registered in the age group of 10 to 22 years. The social agency representative Julian Fairskout says that the prevention measures in the city works, but she calls for measures for the most serious crimes. Priority number 1 is to give all children and young people a safe and good upbringing, free from crime. At the same time, we need more targeted measures when necessary. The police have also... I would be interested to see if the police have done any sort of like follow-up, because they started this year or last year at some point they started doing more street patrols. If that's been impactful at all, like because our argument, I mean, at least mine at that point, was that for this kind of stuff you have to be near the scene of the crime when it happens, right? You can't really, it doesn't seem like you can just do preventative measures for this.
No, I think you're going to have to hit a little bit harder here, and it's going to be much harder to catch. You can't just put up these kind of youth fun houses, or what do you call them? The sort of activity centers.
Yeah, the youth, the community centers, and
I mean, I'm not an expert in this sort of youth crime stuff. Where I've been on the streets and looked at this stuff, but yeah, the kind of more lefty notion that you can just add more youth centers with ping pong tables, it's going to stop this stuff. It's always struck me as a little bit
not when it becomes as organized as it seems to have gotten, right?
Yeah, but yeah, of course, crime does change, and I do believe what they're saying, that say like the general youth or person who's alive now would be more neutered, less disposed, simply because definitely. They're inside a lot more. The kind of standards in behavior for families, for schools and stuff, it's a lot more strict, not in the disciplinary sense, but in terms of the expectations. Because I feel like things were just a lot looser in the past. You weren't as controlled, but that would also lead to a little bit more deviation.
And you could say that the burden of parenting was a bit more shared, like the dynamic between I guess the elderly and the youths lent itself to some random man could tell you off for acting like a dingus in the street, right? I don't think that happens as much anymore.
No, maybe not, but also I mean the general there's a lot higher expectations from parents now than there used to be. Like if you think about, say, the 90s, where the kids would, have these latchkey kids who just get the key around their necks and, okay, you just have to walk home by yourself when you can,
Sure.
Mommy's at work, so you'll just sit and watch TV or just do whatever. And there was just, a lot more movement, I guess. And part of that is because of digitization, to be frank. Like, say, like the idea of, you know, like there are people in my family who were offered, for example, jobs at the school for, you know, elementary school as a sort of arts and crafts teacher because they just knew carpentry, right? And they didn't have any qualifications. There was no sort of registry about, you know, are you qualified? Are you in the system of eligible teachers? And have you gone through proper pedagogical training and something like that? It's
Jesus
like, okay,
Christ.
okay, you know how to put together like a birdhouse or something. Maybe you can come and teach the kids. And a lot of teachers were like that. They were just seemingly picked up, and some of them were just drunks, I remember. And like this was in the 90s, right? Where it's just
Interesting.
generally it just wasn't that big of a deal. The people moved back and forth, and because of the registries, like you just weren't followed up on in the same way that people are now. So, I mean, it was good and bad, but certainly when you wake up, you live in a world like that, like the type of crime that's going to happen in this more strictly monitored world, it's going to be different, right? And it's going to be, some of it's related to just gangs and organized like gang supply chains, and other parts of it is just going to be, you know, this kind of like online wackos who just go off the rails on occasion. Because that's, I mean, as much as people want to sit and talk about, you know, immigration as much of an issue as it is, part of the problem is it's just going to be, you know, terminally online people who eventually just go off the rails. That it's not like every person who plays a video game is going to be like that, but this is something that, you know, you just didn't have 50 years ago, 40 years ago. People who are just online constantly consuming.
It's a sort of like force multiplier, right?
Yeah. I mean,
so once
you know,
it happens, it gets worse, right?
You had like a lower threshold for violence in the past, and confrontation, and, you know, duels, if you want to say that, the disputes and this kind of stuff that would be resolved by violence. But let's say like the single cell terrorist, quote unquote, or like, let's say like Breivik, for example, in Norway. Like there's just no way to explain the type of profile that he has without being terminally online. And the same thing with some of these.
A lot of people have tried,
case,
but that's the one thing that sort of tracks across all of them, right?
Yeah,
is that he's just a terminally online retard, essentially.
There are other, you know, inside of that brew, there's this witch's brew, there are other ingredients as well, but it doesn't make sense without the terminal online factor. You know, and that's what you see with a lot of these like school shooters, or like the guy with the bow and arrow, and a lot of these wackos, is that they're usually quite lonely, and they're online all the time. And without that, it's just, this case doesn't work. So I don't have any kind of fix-all solutions to it, but I think it's important to sort of understand, at least when things are happening, you get these sort of really critical, insane cases of people who just, just go nuts, right? Wasn't that the case? One of these cases with a guy who shot at the police officer as well in Norway, and then they killed him.
It was he was like a Muslim extremist, as in like he was like a Norwegian guy who turned himself into like some Islamist extremist or something.
Well, this was another guy, but I know that was the bow and arrow.
Oh, that was the bow and arrow
guy who basically had like radicalized himself into schizo Islam or something. But you had like another guy who,
the bow and arrow guy ended up not really doing anything, though. Thankfully, like he was just like walking around being dangerous.
Well, he did kill a lot of people, I think.
Did he?
Oh yeah, he did. I remember that case. So
sorry,
he had like a machete.
Oh no, yeah, 5 people died. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, I was thinking of something else.
But recently you had this situation with this one guy who opened fire at a cop, right? And they fired back, and he died. But he was sort of also described as being kind of unassuming, but slightly interested in a lot of like alt news stuff. You know, and I think that's also like a guy who must have been lonely and sort of just kind of tipped over at some point and went full, you know, what's that meme, the I hate the Antichrist stuff.
Playing a lot of Heartsfire.
Come out and, you know, eat the corn syrup or whatever. Like, I hate the Antichrist. I've locked myself in the apartment and with an automatic gun. Yeah, sorry, I'm just rambling now.
No, I get
I think it's an interesting aside.
I think on that note, round off. We're getting close to 1.5 hours.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you found it fun. Please leave a like if you did enjoy it. That is really appreciated. Anything else you want to say before we leave?
No. Yeah, just enjoy the weather. I hope the rest of you are enjoying this. I mean, the weather's just been amazing the last week.
It has
So
for us, yeah.
I hope you're not terminal online. You go.
I'm
touch
grilling
grass
every
instead.
day, so out there grilling. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. Let me check I believe I have noted down Lavader, who I met at Karlstage as a guest then, and we've been talking about a couple of different topics, so I'll get back to you, Luddic Path, about what that would be, but I'm really looking forward to having him on, and yeah, thank you everyone, and have a good night.